Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Great to see all of your shining faces. Thanks to those of you who are on video. We actually feel like we're talking to human beings, which helps sometimes, especially in this world of AI. I don't know about you guys, but I have found that as we deal more and more with AI and go deeper and deeper, I've had to also kind of make sure that I'm consciously taking a break from technology. So walking out in the woods for an afternoon or just sitting on a patio without my phone whatsoever and kind of just remembering what the world is like. I know Xavier and I talk about this all the time, but that's definitely a practice that I think we have to be a little bit more intentional about now because it's so easy to get wrapped up in all of this stuff, and it's easy to want to build things forever and ever and use AI and research things that we might be missing. And so, you know, make sure you're also taking time to step outside for a minute and look at the sunshine and remember that we're on a planet and we don't live in computers, because I know I can forget that sometimes. So, anyway, happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to, I think this is the third session in this. I hope that it's been helpful. The feedback that we're getting is very, very positive. And every week that we do one of these, I get at least one message of somebody saying, hey, this was really cool. I built this, or I had been struggling with that one thing. And what Xavier taught us saved me, a week or two. And so that's kind of our intention with this is we're here to just help. We have a great resource as in Xavier as our director of AI, and even Annabelle, our COO. It's scary. I've told her this a million times, and I'm going to make her blush. I've been watching her the last couple of weeks utilize AI. For those of you that were on the call last week, you saw her literally build a website over the course of 1 hour that already started to be able to get ranked and was already faster than most websites out there that any other agency has put out. And it's really cool to watch how quickly you can start to utilize AI when you have the basics down. And so that's kind of the purpose of this, is helping you guys get the basics down from somebody that is an expert, but can also speak to humans. It's rare. So before we kick off with Xavier today, I'd love to just have one person share what is one thing that you have done in the last week with AI. And it can be something that you built. It can be a struggle that you had. It can be you threw your computer out into traffic because you were tired of the response that Claude was giving. But I mean, just what's one thing that you've experienced with AI in the last week in your business, no matter what it was? And this goes for our team that are on here too. I see a couple of us. So even somebody on our team. But I'm very patient. I'm going to wait until at least one person shares something. Carrie, Hannah, Jocelyn. I see you there, Carrie. Judd, how's it going? My
I've been
question as you were getting in was, I'm going to painfully force one person on here before we get started to share one experience they've had in the last week or two with AI, whether it's something that you built, a limitation that you ran up against, if you got tired of it and you threw your computer into traffic. Um, yeah. Yeah. Carrie, are
used
you unmuted?
Copilot count.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I've been using Copilot in Excel, and I've been downloading some reports from Service Titan and not really in a format that I can use. And I've been telling it to reformat it, give me chart summaries and all that, and it does it in like 2 minutes, and then take me a half a day to figure it out.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Carrie. I really appreciate the share. And I don't think you were on our first call. On the first
No,
call,
this is my first one.
awesome. One of the things that we recommended or gave as a use case opportunity in the first call is download your entire basically Service Titan data, upload it into Claude, or really any AI will give you good information. We reference Claude because we know how capable it is, but upload all of that data and then just ask it some questions about the business. Ask it for things that you might be missing. Ask it for blind spots. Ask it for things that are going well. Just ask some general questions that you would really want to know about the business, and you'll be pretty amazed what comes back. Yeah, Judd.
I didn't realize we were workshopping this and I could ask questions. This is amazing.
We can
So great.
so So for those of you, I guess I should have said this. So for those of you that it's your first time, because I do see some new faces on here, the structure is this. We will do kind of a teaching. Xavier's going to go through maybe 20, 30 minutes of kind of very specific education based on what we know people need, and then we'll open up the rest of it for Q&A. But this time I wanted to start with like, okay, who somebody tell me something about that they've been doing with AI. So if you have something, share it now. We might address it, or we might address it if it's more of a question. We might address it at the end.
Okay, because you brought up Claude, I'd like to ask one question early, and I will have plenty as we go.
Yeah.
So I started using chat as my initial AI tool, I guess, and I use it several times every single day. It's become an assistant to me, and I love it. But I've heard Claude for what I do or what we do in a business standpoint could be the better platform to start utilizing. What is your guys' thoughts?
Xavier, I
Yeah,
will
kind
let you
of
answer that, and then we'll rock into it. And then trust me, Judd, we're gonna get we'll go a lot deeper in that if you want to.
sweet. Yeah, on that thread, I absolutely love Claude over pretty much every other platform right now for using AI to do kind of high level professional work. Um, they, as a company, they have spent a lot more money than others on buying very, very curated data that they try and train their models off of. And they also are partnered with just, in my opinion, a little bit better of research engineers that do data cleaning for them in a way that sets their models up for professional work a little bit better than ChatGPT and Gemini. While Chat is an amazing platform, and they just released the ChatGPT work mode a couple weeks ago. I definitely recommend going to Claude if you need to do high level decision based work where you're processing a lot of data and doing everything kind of on that thread. Because their training data is much cleaner than all of the other companies, and they quite frankly just buy better data than the other ones. And overall, their models tend to be in in the way that they train things, they have a bit more personality. So it will push back on you if it thinks something is wrong, whereas ChatGPT or Gemini tend to be a bit more of a yes man, which is actually a topic we'll get into a bit more today as well. Um, but
Awesome,
yeah,
because I've
long story
noticed that
short,
too. Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah, where it gives me the answer
yeah,
I want, not necessarily what I need to hear. So,
yeah, Claude is much more likely to give you an answer that you need to hear rather than one you want to hear. As Anthropic has taught their model to kind of think in its own way a little bit, which can be equally frustrating sometimes as well. Um, but if you're using it to make kind of decisions and that sort of thing, I would lean into Claude a lot more than the other platforms.
Awesome. There you go. Now you know, Judd. And I'm sure
appreciate
if
it.
even if you want some help on the backside of this, I'm sure Xavier can give you some tips on like
Hmm.
if you want to migrate over, we can help with that.
Hmm.
Okay, that'd be
Yeah,
great because I mean, it
absolutely.
has so much data right now because I've plugged so much into it. It knows me, chat does, and if there's a way for me to pull something there, shoot, that'd be amazing.
Hmm.
So,
Yep,
Yeah, on
totally.
the inside of Claude, once you get set up on the platform, they have a really nice kind of mega prompt that'll go and extract all of your user memories and such and prepare Claude for you.
that's great.
So it's three clicks that takes about 15-20 minutes on Fable
Okay,
to let it rip through it.
wonderful. All right, I'll stop now. You guys can do your thing. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Awesome, guys. Well, I think that was a perfect start, and let's get right into today's lesson. Xavier is going to take it away, and then this is kind of an interactive thing, right? If you have a question during Xavier's talk, please raise your hand. We'll answer it, and then, like I said, we'll make sure that we have time for question and answer at the end of it. But we want to make sure that you guys are getting the most possible value out of it. All right, my friend, take us away.
Fantastic. Are y'all able to see my screen all good?
We got you.
Hello? Okay,
Yep,
sweet.
we can hear you, or
So
we
yeah,
can see you. We can see the
okay,
screen.
great. So yeah, I guess jumping right into it. We're starting off this week breaking down the 4Ds framework from Anthropic, as well as a couple other AI companies, and mapping some of those back to WIT core values as well, kind of how we approach AI, how the big companies are out there recommending people do it, and give you guys a couple techniques to be able to delegate and evaluate AI responses in pretty much all of the secret sauce that we're doing behind the scenes over here. Um, so first and foremost, I like to use a little analogy where when you first start using AI, it's as if you were to hire the most brilliant, amazing new tech and just tell them nothing. So if you start off with you tell a new hire to go handle the Johnson job, but you don't give them an address, job history, scope, budget, or a heads up that Mrs. Johnson is absolutely furious about the last time your techs were there, they're going to be set up for failure. Um, and kind of doubling down on that, you have a very skilled worker, but they still get something wrong. But it's not because they're bad. It's because the outcome was decided before the truck ever left the lot. The brief was empty. They didn't have proper context. And the best way to get a good outcome is by giving all of the context surrounding a job so the tech can get out there and do the best work possible. Um, and kind of on that thread, working with AI is exactly the same handoff where you have a brilliant tool that has 150 IQ and is as if you had the smartest toddler walking around in the world, but they don't have life experience. They don't know you out of the box. And the skill isn't quite the software, it's the brief, the judgment, and how the follow through goes and is operated. And that's what we'll be diving into today. So fluent doesn't necessarily mean technical because you got a lot of people that drive a truck every day, but they don't rebuild transmissions. AI fluency is very similar, where it is all about your judgment and how you use the tool, not necessarily how you engineer the tool. Because ultimately, you don't need to understand an engine to drive a car. You don't need to understand how a drill works in order to use it. And this tech is moving so fast at all time that we're just going to give you guys a couple of habits that will be very durable no matter where the industry goes, how models are working, because well, you'll have the tools to learn how they work and what you can do with the tools, not necessarily what is going on under the hood, because ultimately good AI work is efficient, effective, ethical, and safe. And if you always kind of stay in those four buckets, you'll get a real result out without burning your hours, tokens, and spend as AI costs balloon more and more. As capability increases, all these companies are starting to raise their prices. And that's led to a lot of very interesting calls over the last couple weeks where we have all of this information out there, but we just need people to have a baseline understanding of what is the tool, what can you do with it, because the downside of AI is it sounds equally confident when it's completely correct as when it's completely wrong. Because AI is a predictive engine, it's going to try to create the best answer at all times, but it doesn't necessarily check the facts for you. And smooth delivery isn't evidence, it's just sycophancy. So, we're going to be breaking down some strategies to show you why plausible isn't the same as correct and how you can use AI to get a better outcome every time you use it. So, jumping right into it, the first thing I like to start with is always picking kind of your mode of AI interaction. It breaks down to three main categories: automation, augmentation, and agency. So, an example of automation is when you describe a task very, very definitively. It is the same 6 steps every time. For example, you want 40 reviews to be summarized into the 5 things customers keep saving. It's the thing we always like to advise people to do is go online, see how AI is reading your website. How is AI reading reviews? What is the bot that's going out there listening to things saying about you? Because an automation based task is very good for repeatable and well defined work, but it tends to break when the task itself wasn't well defined because to this common thread of AI isn't it knows a little bit of everything, but it doesn't know how to do everything. So if you're able to kind of pause, have AI interview you first, and figure out what you're trying to do before you sit down and just delegate off to AI and let it go bonk wild for a while, you'll almost always get a very good, consistent outcome. Second bucket I like to go with is augmentation. And this is where you're using AI as a thinking partner, not just a vending machine of outcomes where You're trying to answer a question like, should I raise my dispatch fee? Have AI play the devil's advocate and kind of challenge your thinking along the way and argue with, like literally argue with it. So say, based, here's my last 20 jobs. Is my booking price too high? Is my call out fee too high? What are the objections that I'm getting in my business in this moment? And this type of automation or augmentation is very good when you need to make high level decisions, come up with pricing strategy. But of course, it breaks when you just take the first output from AI and just have it agree with you because no one needs a yes man around, and AI will always default to being a yes man until you tell it specifically, I want you to disagree with me. So the tidbit for the augmentation bucket is have AI be a devil's advocate because it doesn't feel bad when a robot's arguing with you. So it'll give you a very honest answer. You just have to give it that leeway to say, yes, you're allowed to disagree if the numbers don't add up with what I'm seeing here. And then there's agency. And this is when you give AI a goal and you're sitting at the top describing how it should be done. So you hand over a goal, you hand over rules, and an AI agent is going to go off and work on its own for a while. For example, you want your inbox to be watched. You have a Claude connector that's linked right up into Gmail for you. You can have it watch your inbox, draft easy replies, and flag the rest for you. And that'll save hours and hours of work. And it's really, really good for ongoing chores with clear rules. And something I personally use this for is every morning when I sit down to start working for the day, I have my Claude go through, scan my inbox, scan my Slack, and help me time box what I need to do for that day. And it does it in such a way where each time you use the same chat and you go back into the thread, it's able to learn from all of the prior things that it's seen. So if you say, create my time box today, and then in that same chat, you say, great, now I need to do it again. AI is going to go out, pull the most recent context for you, and just help get through that morning kind of chore block of I need to do 50 things, but I don't know where to start. And this one breaks, especially when you give a very fuzzy goal and don't define a specific outcome. Kind of tying back into what we went over last week, where sorry, there's a motorcycle riding up the road next to me. Um, but whenever you give a very, very clear outcome, you're able to have AI go off and be more agentic of sorts, where it's going to give you a very consistent result based off of an outcome and a goal, because these models are getting very, very smart, but they don't always know where to start. And most real work day to day kind of blends all three. And no matter what task you give it, it will almost always fall into one of these three buckets, whether you need a full automation, you need augmentation, or you need AI to just go out there and take some initiative and do something as nice as watch my inbox and tell me what needs to be responded to first. But of course, it needs a couple defining factors to say what is actually important, and it has to learn from you before it goes off on its own. And now we'll get into the 4D framework from Anthropic. This was built by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, alongside two professors that teach this day to day for a living. We didn't invent this framework, but our core values over at WIT are very aligned with what we're doing here. And it comes down to delegation. How do you decide what you want to hand off to AI? The question is what is mine, what should be the machine's, and what do we share? Description, so telling AI very clearly what is the outcome and what do you need. Do I give a question? For example, did I give it what a great outcome actually requires, the goal, the context, and the constraints? Once that output comes back, how do you discern whether what you got back is any good? The question I like to ask is, does this hold up? Are the facts grounded? Are they cited? Where did they come from? Is the reasoning proper? And does this fit what I actually asked for? As well as diligence. So the more you use AI, a trap I see happen all the time is the more you use it, the more comfortable you get using the tool. And this leads to you just have to be very, very diligent on verifying what you did with AI, disclosing that you used AI to create an outcome, and then owning that outcome no matter what it was, because the question you always have to ask is, would I put my name on this output? And am I being honest about how it was created? Because if you just start pumping out all sorts of content with AI, it very quickly will start to drift without keeping a very diligent kind of go back through, read what you did. Was the outcome good? Did I choose the right task? Did I ask a better question on describing what I need done? And based off of all of that, am I being honest about what I created, how it was made, and would I put my name on this? Like this slideshow, for example, I used Claude to create it, but it's been built off of hours and hours of sitting down, doing research all in one chat thread, and going through and just reading it over and over again. Do I agree with it? Do I like with what it's saying? And did it push back on me in different moments throughout the creation? Because ultimately you don't want a yes man. And you can, if you want a yes man, go walk down the street, find a bar, ask someone, hey, check out this amazing thing I made. And they're usually going to say it's pretty cool, but if it's not valuable to you and hasn't driven the outcome that you set out to solve, it's ultimately useless and is wasting time. So this breaks down now into delegation. So anytime you're sitting down to automate a task, optimize for impact, because the best AI users are always going to be the experts first, because AI is just all it does is multiply judgment that you already have, can't supply judgment that you don't. Your knowledge is always the moat, can be a liability, but it also cannot, it doesn't have to be, as long as you sit down and think before you start automating something, because everyone wants to sit down and automate something fun instead of the high impact one. The fun task is always going to feel very productive because AI is going out, it's thinking, it's calling all these tools, it's doing things, and ultimately it just feels good when you're using AI in this weird, twisted kind of magical AI casino type thing where you're putting tokens in and you get this outcome back. But ultimately, if you pick by revenue, not by novelty, it'll usually be a much more valuable use of whatever you're doing in that moment. And the kind of the final thing on this thread is decide upfront what is mine, what is the machine, and what is shared. Because you have to have a couple buckets before you ever open the chat. Delegation is workflow design. It's not just dumping a million tasks and praying you get a good outcome back, because otherwise it's going to take just as long as it would have for you to sit down in that moment and do the work the old-fashioned way. And by sitting down, pausing, and figuring out what you want to delegate, it's going to give you the very, very nice tools to kind of zoom in, zoom out, and find a couple things that are going to actually be useful for your bottom line. So a little bit of homework for everyone is pick one recurring task this week, write out its steps on paper. What would you do in that moment? I call them SOPs, standard operating procedures, and tag each step that you want to do yourself, which steps you want AI to do, and which steps you want to do with the assistance of AI. And in doing so, you will have designed your first workflow. And the next slide is going to show how we do this. So first up, we always decompose the job. So if I want to say win back last month's quiet quotes, you got to first sit down and find the pattern. Where is the judgment you needed? Where is the money going? And which relationships must stay human in order to continue the quality of service and build a great business? Because lists and first drafts should go to the machine before you go and start aligning with the team, going and making delegations to people versus AI agents. And we like to just slow down and always decompose a task into its kind of core atomic principles to figure out kind of what I need to do and the moment I sit down to automate something. So, for example, start with which customers are we looking at and why did they go cold? So, this is kind of a task that has a lot of pattern reading and history. This is where your judgment calls will often be very useful right off the bat. And I always like to start with kind of thinking back on when have I done a similar task in the past? What went well? What didn't go well? Because AI doesn't have your life experience. The only thing that does is what's living between your ears. So that is something that should always be handled by the operator. Now, when you need to go and pull a giant list of unaccepted quotes, go in, throw it into Service Titan, get a connector up to your Google Drive, and just say, all right, this is a pure retrieval task. This is something that software can do. It's not necessarily something that the owner of the task needs to do in that moment. For example, what we were saying earlier about pulling a whole bunch of information into a cowork chat and having AI go and read the data, format it the way you need. That's a perfect task for AI where you have a giant output of information, you have your judgment. Now you just need something reformatted, moved around, maybe put into a different kind of spreadsheet or a presentation or something similar. That's a great task for AI. And then when you need to, say, draft a follow-up message, this is where AI will do a very good job out of the box at I'll do a very good job out of the box on pulling all of the information together. And now that you have a formatted, nicely done AI output, have it write a draft. It'll usually get you 80% of the way there. Best case scenario, you can just send it right off to a customer and maybe you get a new job out of it. Or worst case scenario, if you just let AI go kind of run amok, you might send something you don't want to. So I always like to tell people the most important thing is anything client facing, try drafting it first with AI and then approve it yourself and hit that send button kind of on your own, because the moment you start getting very comfortable with fully automated outbound communication, things tend to break down because while models are really, really good right now, they're not perfect. So just short circuit it entirely and have AI do the drafting. And then when you get comfortable enough with it, maybe you delegate it out to have that step go fully autonomous, but always start with a human review kind of stage in there. When it comes to making a specific offer or giving a discount, it's your margin. The machine is never going to feel the cost. It'll just not have as many tokens to spend on things when revenue starts dropping. So when it comes to offers and anything like that, you can also use AI to make suggestions, but ultimately as the business owner, just do it yourself. Use all of the data that AI has pulled together to give you recommendations and then make that final call on your own and keep that autonomy kind of in the hands of the human. And finally, hitting send, it's your name, your relationship, your business on the line. Always hit send yourself. It's very, very tempting to just let AI go off, start sending texts, doing all sorts of stuff. But if it has your name on it, if it has your email signature, just press the blue button. It takes 30 seconds versus taking 3 hours to do it all by yourself. And just kind of always map it before you prompt, because 5 hours of prompting design is going to save you hours and hours of reworking the task. Now, kind of on that same thread for a description now, context is the whole game. AI can't read your mind, and it's never going to tell you, I don't have enough to go on, until you have taught it when it doesn't have enough to go on. Because every gap that is in a prompt the bot is gonna fill with its best guess. It's a predictive engine that is always going to try to predict the next word. And that's where a lot of the intelligence inside of these models come from, because if you can figure out what word someone is going to say next, you have to have a lot of context on how you pick the next word that's going through your head. Oddly, that's kind of how AI first started getting trained, is based off of all prior words in the sentence, it was autocomplete. And then in 2019, the transformer architecture came out and we started implementing attention. That's where AI started getting really good at kind of understanding how concepts relate to each other. And then researchers just threw billions and billions and billions of dollars. I think we're almost to $1 trillion in AI spend over the last 3, 4 years where it's a really good predictive engine, but ultimately it is still very similar to autocomplete. And it's able to pull a lot of great context, but it's never going to tell you, I don't have enough to go on, because it's always just trying to predict the next best guess, and it's going to state it like a fact. So unstated context is the number one source of bad output in anything that we're doing at WIT, anything that Anthropic is doing, OpenAI is doing, any of the major companies out there. AI just needs context because the more you give it, the better it's able to predict the next word and understand what you're trying to do. So I like to say three things every time I sit down to start prompting. What is the goal? What is the approach? And what is the behavior I want? So, what do I want? How do I think about it? And how do I want it to act in terms of the audience, the constraints, what to avoid, what we like, what we want more of? And then doubling down on what is the tone I want? Is this I'm responding to an angry customer review? Am I responding to an internal staff? Am I writing down a workflow? And how long do I want that to be? Because if you want a one pager, tell AI that you want a one pager, or it might give you one out of the box, might give you a 3 bullet summary, or it might even go off and make a 50-page outline and brand new business plan that isn't anything that you asked for. Um, Kind of on that thread, it's very important to always push back on AI because by default, it's going to be a yes man. They're trained to be agreeable. It's always they in the beginning of every system prompt behind all of the major models, they're trained to be a helpful and honest assistant. Notice the order of words there. It's helpful before being honest. And we've been doing a lot of experiments over here at WIT where we've kind of flipped the order of those, and we're seeing really good outputs by something as simple as just flipping the order of words that are in the instructions. Because by default, it is trained to be agreeable, and often it'll validate shaky ideas and then cave the moment you object. So, an example of this is if I'm sitting down to prompt and I get a really good output back, and then all of a sudden I'm just sitting there and I'm like, actually, I really don't like that one. AI is if I'm using ChatGPT, it'll just come back and be like, you are absolutely right. Don't do that thing. I don't, you're so right. We're going to completely switch direction now. And it's like, what happened? Does AI have a spine? And no, it doesn't. It's a bunch of graphics cards living in a warehouse. Um, so you have to tell it when you first sit down to start prompting, ask it to challenge your assumptions, and don't change your answer just because I push back. Only if I give you a better reason. And adding something as small as that to your prompts will give you a much, much more consistent outcome that is going to kind of sit there and push back on you when AI doesn't have enough context, when it doesn't have all of these things. Because by default, it just doesn't know that. It knows the whole internet and it knows a little bit of everything, but it's very much on the operator to kind of steer the direction based off of all the context you're pasting in. So, don't, a lot of words to say. Don't be afraid to give it a 50-page document all at once and say, based off of all of this documentation, all of the stuff you can see in my connectors, challenge what my assumptions may be. Help me identify blind spots. And it'll often be very surprising, kind of the little tidbit that it pulls out that often I personally doing it, I wouldn't have considered every time. And it it doesn't feel bad when AI pushes back in the same way that when you have a bunch of people around you and you're like, I just need you to do this thing. It takes 10 minutes for AI to go back and forth with you and kind of challenge your assumptions and then find some kind of common ground. Whereas if you do that with an employee, you sit there arguing for 2 hours and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I just argued for 2 hours with this guy about how something should be done rather than just going with the flow and figuring out what is the best answer. Because AI has no ego. Don't be afraid to leverage that. But that also is a double edged sword where it doesn't have an ego. So it's going to mirror yours. So tell it to push back, tell it to kind of go in, challenge assumptions, and only agree in that moment when all of the data backs it up. And kind of on that same thread, you can't outsource critical thinking. I love to use AI to poke holes in my own work where it's the same instinct that reviews a bid before it goes out to the door. You run these decisions daily. Now just point it back at the machine. Say, wait, is this something that is actually valuable for me? Yes or no? If no, how can I make this more valuable? Poke holes in the work, and don't never ask an AI, is the answer right? Ask it, does the reasoning hold? Because then you're checking the work and you're checking the thought process behind it rather than the result. Because ultimately, then you can reuse that reasoning on the next 10, 15 tasks or jobs you give AI. And that confident tone that ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any of these systems use is a massive, massive trap. And it has a very specific name called automation bias, where humans will very frequently overtrust whatever a computer is delivering because, oh, it's coming from this giant data center. AI is really smart. It does all sorts of good things, but it will say things extremely confidently, and you can't interact with AI in the same way that you'd interact with a person, but also it doesn't have an ego. So you can be very direct with it and say, no, that wasn't right. Here's why it wasn't right. Challenge me. Does this reasoning hold? Does this chain of thought make sense? And based off of that, the more times you do that, the more you'll kind of develop that muscle to prompt AI, work alongside it, and start jumping really deep into that augmentation lens where now you're able to use AI to make these decisions because you have an expert panel of advisors that know a little bit about all of human nature and all of the internet and all of the things on there. And you can find if the reasoning holds and you're evaluating the chain of thought, the reasoning, and what that outcome was kind of all in one step rather than just taking the first answer and the easy way out. Because never trust the first draft. It'll usually be confident and wrong, but wrong is still wrong. So here are 5 questions I like to ask before I ever trust an AI model. Is saying, can I verify this every claim against a real source? Point AI out back out at the internet. Claude out of the box has a web search tool. It can scrape websites, it can scrape company documentation, and if a specific number or fact can't be validated, the model will find it. It just has to know that it has that space to go back through and come up with something different and go try to find a source that might back that fact up. Again, kind of a double-edged sword where you then have to go and click on the citation, click into the link, and do a quick skim through to make sure it's a good source. Because if you get a bad source, AI is still going to try to cite it, but that's when your discernment and your judgment come back in, and you can say, no, actually, I don't want the Wall Street Journal for this one. I want to use the New York Times. Or, great, I have trends coming in, but they're from a small local government. They're not from the Bureau of Labor Services or something larger like that. So be very mindful about what AI is citing and where that information comes from. And that can be as simple as just asking it to verify the reasoning and find where all those claims came from. And then when it gives you some citations back, click into each of them, give it a quick skim because that is something that is outside of your network that might be informing the response. Number 2 is, did it answer everything I asked? Smooth answers love to quietly skip the hard part. And this is one where it's very hard to kind of zoom out and remember to do this every time. Honestly, I find myself sometimes in this trap where I get an outcome that I really like, or I get an output that looks really good. Then you're like, wait, it didn't actually answer the whole question. It just answered the easy 5 things to find on the internet. So then inside of Claude, I'll go and say, great, now use a deep research tool. Go back through. Here are 10 sources that I really like. Here are 5 mentors in marketing. Here's one in business, and here's one in AI. See what these experts might have to say. Does this reasoning hold based off of all of these external sources that I love and use every day? Because inconsistencies are going to hide in the third paragraph. They're never going to kind of show up in the first sentence. When dealing with a very long AI output, it's very important to make sure it stays coherent across the whole outcome. And this is one where it's a little bit less the case now because models have gotten so much better in the last 6 months. But if you think back to the GPT-3 era or early chat GPT. You get 2/3 of the way through a response, and all of a sudden it starts talking about a dog walking up the street when you ask it about something completely different. It's like, wait, what is going on here? This model just gave itself ADHD, and it just goes off on a tangent. Um, and next, what an expert in this nod along. Read it through your most skeptical customer's eyes, your most skeptical mentor's eyes, and really challenge a model at any point because to the same thread, if you wouldn't put your name on whatever it gave you back, the output is not done yet. And if it's a no, it doesn't get sent to clients. Just keep working on it. Maybe take it out of AI, put it in, paste a response into Word, workshop it manually, print it out. I love to print things and red pen them, highlight them, go through, circle stuff I like, and then now AI has gotten so good that you can red pen a printed out document and upload a photo of it back into the model. And if you want to give your feedback on pen and paper, you can do that now. But to that same thread of make sure you'd put your name on it. We make all staff at WIT has to sign what they're doing when they input their monthly client data and things like that, where yes, AI could go out and automate something out of the box, but you still need that sign off because if you don't have ownership, you're never going to get the outcome you want. So, kind of on this thread, we'll now break down what confidently wrong looks like. The four main things I see AI responses give all the time is these weird little suspiciously precise numbers where you get a response that's like 87% of homeowners are doing X, Y, and Z. Within 22 minutes, we do A, B, and C. And you get these outputs that sometimes look like an old BuzzFeed article where it gives very, very exact numbers that feel like evidence, but it's not evidence. It's whatever AI thought the most likely next word would be, and those aren't always right. If it gives you a named source you've never heard of, studies, reports, journals, there is honestly, a lot of legal cases going on right now where AI has hallucinated case law. And my last job I was working in was the insurance industry, and this was a big one for us where you get this amazing output that looks right, but sometimes AI will just cite a contract clause that doesn't exist. And you have to, in that moment, go through, red pen it, and find where that thing happened. So any citation that AI gives you is a claim. It's not a receipt. So just make sure at any point, if it gives a named source, you go look at the source, make sure it's something that's actually real, because AI loves to make up numbers and it loves to give very, very precise numbers that feel right when you're reading it, but ultimately it's just made up. Another one is if there is no hedging in a response, that's generally a pretty dead giveaway that AI needs a little bit more context to do that task. Because real expertise is going to say it depends. Check your local code, check your local zoning laws. Here's a couple reviews that might back up what we're saying, and give AI that moment where it can kind of slow down and answer with a lot of certainty because it's not good to just have this super confident response that is exactly what you want to hear because the more an answer is going to flatter and just kind of gas up your existing plan, the harder it is you should slow down, pause, and look at it because to the thread from earlier, agreeable is always AI's default setting. So the move is to ask, are you sure? Show me the source. Break down the reasoning because real facts are always going to survive that, and invented facts are going to fold very, very quickly, even under AI's own self scrutiny. So ask, judge, ask a better question. It's not just steps, it's a cycle. Describe something first, discern, run through the 5 questions, find what's right, find what's wrong, and then refine it. Because you can always say warmer, shorter, where's the source? And the third draft is where things will get good. Because good work, AI work is a conversation. They're conversational assistants, not command platforms. So a one and done prompt will often go wrong. Back and forth prompting will almost always get a better outcome. on that same thread, you can't outsource responsibility. And just in the nature of time, we'll kind of skip through this a little bit where make sure sensitive info is staying out of tools that you don't control. Customer names, addresses, payment details. If you wouldn't post it on your website, never post it into a free tool. If you're on a business plan or something similar, it's generally okay to do so, to paste it in and see what you get back. While you're working with AI, it should be drafting. A human will approve it because every time that something actually matters, just have the person make a final sign off on it. And if it's wrong, it's on you. It's not on the robot because AI can never take responsibility and accountability off your plate because there's no one to blame. You can't just sue OpenAI because ChatGPT gave you a bad business decision. You're still the operator. Um, and kind of tying it all back together, when working with AI, always remember that the outcomes and whatever you're using it for is going to affect your relationship with your customers either in a positive way or in a negative way. Focus on the relationship first because you can always get a better result and a better outcome. A relationship takes a lot longer to build and maintain. So, anytime you're working with a tool, make sure if it's customer facing, you've reviewed it, you sent the final response, and kind of now based off of all of this, we'll open it up for open Q&A and then pick a topic for next week where we'll go deeper into one of these four categories, delegation, description, discernment, or diligence. And based off of kind of where you guys are thinking, we can go and do a deep dive on any one of these individually next week as well.
All right,
And
nicely done, Xavier. As always, I don't know about you guys, but one of the most important things that I grabbed at the very beginning of that is AI will agree with you until you tell it not to. So unless you have told whatever AI you're using, hey, I want you to push back, I want you to question, that's a big one. So with that being said, let's open it up to Q&A. Judd, I'm sure you have at least one. And Richard asked in the chat if Xavier wouldn't mind making a little a little how to as far as how to prompt, and so we'll get that over to you guys as well.
Yeah, I do have one. So
You're gonna watch him do it right now.
oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Cool. Go ahead, Judd.
Oh, so it was actually in the line of what you were talking about, Stephen. So, question for you, Xavier: do we have to put that prompt in every time we're asking any of these questions, or is there some type of global prompts that we can put into the system where it's, hey, use this framework, use this blueprint for everything that I put in here?
yeah, of course. So the nice easy way to do it is for the first couple times you work inside of any platform, I always go and actually let me stop sharing my screen for bandwidth real quick. Um, the first time I sit down in any platform, I generally will paste that in every single chat for the first kind of week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be, and just to build up a baseline of how do I like this? How if I change wording around and try a slightly different framework of I want you to disagree with me versus I want devil's advocate versus I want just an overall outcome based response. Um, I chat with it, try a couple different ways of phrasing it first until you find something that you like. And then this is a little bit Claude specific, but once you're inside of that platform, there's a skill creator skill that shows up under the customize tab. And what I like to do there is when I have a couple prompts that I really like, I tell Claude to create a skill based off of it and then set a system instruction inside of whatever project you're working on that at the beginning of every chat, always call this skill first. That is the user guidelines skill or something similar to that. And then once you kind of have that down, and you kind of like the outputs you're getting, then you can turn it into a skill, and Claude can then automatically call that whenever it feels the need to or it starts responding. Um,
So can I jump in for a
as
second to
a
make
be-
sure I get that? Um,
Yeah, yeah, of
So
course.
I have my new task, whatever the new thing that I'm trying to work on for the specific day. Um, I can have before I start actually asking whatever prompt I'm going to do, I'll have more or less presets that I'll say, hey, for the specific chat we're talking about right now, use X, Y, and Z, bring those in, then I
Mhm.
start my prompt. So it's almost the filter you're bringing into
Yep,
the conversation. Okay. Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
And
I
on
get
on
that.
that thread, skills skills can kind of be used for any one of these categories. I like to keep them very narrow by nature, where if you have one mega skill that goes out and tries to do everything, it'll usually do a pretty good job, but I would keep it very scoped to one particular thing.
I get
For
that.
example, have a skill that is each of the 4Ds, and based off of that, go ahead and say, I want you to challenge me on my outcomes this time. Now, on this one, I want you to challenge the research. And then the more you use it, it's kind of hard to describe until you kind of see it in action.
Yeah.
But the general idea is each skill is a zip file with a whole bunch of prompts inside of it that if there's a certain kind of set of criteria that are matched, then Claude is able to say, when I am being asked to delegate something to another agent, here's how I think about it. Or when I'm sitting down and Judd starts asking me questions about my business and the way we price things, now I'm going to call the pricing decision skill and kind of each of those little atomic tasks.
Okay. Cool. Um, I got one more
Hmm.
if I can ask. Um,
Yeah, of course.
I'm not going to get the term right, Xavier, but you're talking about more or less widgets, hooks, things you can put on other programs to do certain things.
Hmm.
What is email? Like, what's a good one to start with in terms of doing that?
Yeah, so I would start first with your calendar. Um,
Oh, okay.
depending on what do you guys use Google Workspace or Teams at Medipine?
Teams.
Teams? Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, on that one, Claude has a Teams integration. It's called let me pull it up just so I get the right thing for you. Um, it is connectors. Yeah, so under the connectors tab, there is a Microsoft 365 connector that you can just link into Claude, and based off of that, it'll be able to access your calendar. If you get, depending on the permissions you set for it, it can access your email, your Teams, any of the above. But I always start with my calendar, just because if it can tell me what meetings I have coming up that day,
Yeah.
that's something that's immediately valuable because then one more prompt down the line is great. Now I know all the meetings I have today. Awesome, Claude. Now go connect into my SharePoint and pull all of the relevant documentation and the meeting transcripts from the last time I met with that guy. And it'll right out of the box be able to give you a really nice little meeting prep document. And they just partnered with Microsoft to release a really nice connector for it a couple months ago. They used to not support Teams very well, but that's changed a lot this summer. So start with your calendar, and then based off of your calendar, say, start preparing a research brief for me 15 minutes ahead of time. And the Claude Dispatch tool that you'll see once you're in the desktop UI can schedule things, send you phone notifications, and kind of match you on whatever device you're working on at the moment.
Claude has even like a desktop app that we you can almost
Mhm.
like a dashboard that you're using. Okay, great.
Yeah, so I would recommend there is a web app for it, but the desktop app is really, really good. And you can go as far as connecting it into certain folders on your computer inside of Cowork. Um, and then just let it go off and read all the files in client folder X, Y, and Z. And then do and create actual work and pull from what you've already created, which helps automate that process of getting all of your context into the system. So you don't have to upload a document every single time in the same way you would if it was the web app.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mhm. Of course. I'll send a resource right now for you on kind of how cowork works.
Awesome. All right. We got time for one more if anybody has any other questions.
I have a question. Oh,
Jocelyn.
nope. Richard, go ahead.
So I was just going to
I can
ask,
ask
next
him.
week, could you walk through like Claude Cowork? So we
Mhm.
just went from personal to Cowork, so now we're trying to figure out how to migrate our
Mhm.
personal stuff over, and then maybe walk through like, okay, like walk through connecting teams, email, like what are the things that we
Mhm.
could use? Like I understand there's like, let's learn how to crawl before we walk, but why not try to run a marathon while we're learning to crawl?
Fantastic. Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I guess next week we'll do a setup of sorts, where I go through and just kind of link in a bunch of different connectors into Claude, do a bit more of a platform specific thing on Anthropic, and we can break down kind of what each of the buttons do, how to set it up, how to secure it for your team, and do a bit more hands-on with the Claude platform. Sweet.
Perfect. Sounds like we
Um,
got our session for next week as well.
Fantastic.
All right. Jocelyn, did you have a
Oh.
quick question? Maybe it'll
It's
be
probably
helpful.
not really quick, but just kind of going back to your augmentation portion, and using
Mhm.
your example for like dispatch fees. So I know right now there's a lot of contractors that are starting to add those pricing structures onto their site, and so trying to stay competitive is pretty big within the industry. And so I guess my question
Mhm.
is like when you go into the augmentation, would it be beneficial because everybody has a different pricing schedule or structure to put in that structure within Claude? And then how do you prompt Claude to be able to take that structure and compare it to, the like competitors around your area?
Yeah, so that's one that I actually really love using Claude for. The keyword I always use when I'm doing something similar to that is peer benchmarking. It's another one I kind of stole from the insurance industry where you have 10 companies that have similar risk profiles, all sorts of different things, all sorts of offers, and you want to compare how they look versus other similarly sized companies that may be in their service area. Um, so I would first sit down and say, great, this is the company we're working with. Here's the pricing page on their website. Paste in the link, paste in a couple different jobs, of course, with permission from the client, and then say, based off of this, find competitors that are of similar size on the internet. It'll kick off a deep research task. You may have to click the little plus button in the bottom corner by where you start typing in your chat. Um, and I can't tell if I just froze.
No,
Um,
you're good. You're good.
but based okay. But yeah, based off of any one web page where you have maybe their offers, maybe their information about their founders, how long they've been in business, say do a peer benchmarking report for me based off of this company, based off of this service area, and nail down kind of 3 or 4 criteria that you're looking for, and then say now compare against everyone else, fan out a series of subagents and deep research, and Claude already knows how to do it. It will just go off, spin up 10, 15, 20 agents, and go off for 15 to 20 minutes and build a really pretty report for you on all of the competitors that are adjacent in a certain market segment, and then kind of what they look like, how they act, what they're doing, what they're buying. But the keyword is peer benchmarking on that one in particular. And at WIT as well. This is one where you can use the dashboard connector that we have, Jocelyn, to go through and say, do a peer benchmarking report, pull data specifically from our clients, anonymize it, make sure because we don't want to kind of mix information around if we're sending it to a client. And we have an internal skill that can help you do that as well.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
But yeah,
Cool.
peer benchmarking is amazing, and I absolutely love that little lens with AI.
Awesome. There we go. That is a perfect way or a perfect thing to end on. We got our next week kind of built on. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your Friday. If you have other questions that come up during the week, one, if you can save them for next Friday, great. We'll answer them on the call. If you have a burning question where you're just like, man, I just cannot figure this freaking thing out, shoot it over to us in an email and we will do our best to get an answer to you. Again, we did this because we were kind of sick and tired of all the junk online and people fear-based selling about AI and all this stuff that you needed. And so we're like, cool, we want to just kind of be here to help people. So, like I said, if you have a question and you need it answered quickly, send it over and we will do our best to get it answered for you guys. Awesome. That is all we have. We hope to see all of you again next Friday. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk to you soon. Good to see you, Judd.
Have a good weekend.